Julian Cross had always believed that marriages collapsed loudly. Screaming matches, slammed doors, shattered trust laid bare in ugly confrontations. He never imagined his would erode through polite conversations, forced smiles, and weekends that never included him. The warning signs were subtle at first. Julian's mornings were disciplined and predictable. Up before dawn. Gym. Coffee brewed exactly 4 minutes. Emails skimmed while the city outside his window slowly came alive. He liked control, not dominance, but structure. It was how he stayed grounded. His wife, Meredith Cross, used to fit neatly into that rhythm. Now she moved to a different tempo entirely. She was always packing something. A bag for a weekend trip. A tote for family gatherings. A smile she saved for someone who wasn't Julian. Her phone rarely left her hand, and when it buzzed, she angled the screen away without thinking. Julian noticed everything. He noticed how holidays became negotiations instead of plans. How Meredith stopped asking his opinion and started informing him of decisions already made. He noticed how one name surfaced more often than any other, Logan Pierce. Logan wasn't just Meredith's past. He was her unfinished chapter, the father of her children, the man she insisted would always be involved. Julian accepted that at first. He respected it. He tried to be the steady presence, the one who showed up even when the spotlight wasn't his. But respect slowly turned into erasure. One Friday evening, Julian came home early, carrying groceries Meredith had asked for. The house was quiet, too quiet. He set the bags down just as her voice drifted from the bedroom, low and intimate. "You know I'll be there," she said softly. The kids expect it. Julian paused. A beat passed. Then laughter. Hers. Not the polite laugh she gave coworkers. Not the tired smile she gave him lately. This was lighter. Familiar. Unfiltered. Julian didn't interrupt. He waited until she ended the call and emerged, phone still warm in her hand. "Everything okay?" he asked. She hesitated for half a second. "Yeah, just finalizing plans." 4. She exhaled as if bracing herself. "The holidays." His chest tightened. "We haven't talked about that." "We don't need to," she replied quickly. "It's already understood." Julian studied her face. Understood by who? Meredith crossed her arms. Defensive. By everyone who matters. The sentence landed wrong. That night, the truth finally surfaced. Not in one brutal confession, but in fragments Meredith no longer bothered to soften. She talked openly about traditions she shared with Logan. About how the kids felt most comfortable when both parents were together. About how complicated it would be to change that dynamic just because Julian felt sidelined. "I'm not pushing you out," she said calmly. "You just need to understand your place in this." Julian stared at her. "My place. You help. You support. You're stable," she said. "But Logan is their father. That doesn't disappear because I remarried." The word stable stung more than any insult. Julian realized then that this wasn't about children. It was about control. Meredith wanted 2 lives, one emotional, one convenient, and she expected Julian to remain quietly in the background of both. What she didn't realize was that something had already shifted. The following week, Julian's routine changed. He stopped asking when she'd be home, stopped waiting up, stopped explaining his own schedule. Meredith mistook his silence for surrender. "You're finally getting it," she said one morning, sipping coffee. "This is easier, right?" Julian smiled. Not warmly, not bitterly, just knowingly. Behind that smile, he was having private conversations Meredith knew nothing about. Calls that happened late at night. Emails marked confidential. Discussions about leadership, relocation, and opportunity. An executive position overseas. One that would require complete commitment and absolute independence. For the first time in months, Julian felt something powerful stir in his chest. Freedom. Meredith continued packing for her next family visit, humming as if the future were settled. As if Julian would always be there, quietly filling the space she left behind. She didn't notice when he booked a one-way flight. She didn't ask why his closet began to empty. And she certainly didn't imagine that the man she had reduced to an afterthought was about to step into a role that would make him unreachable. Because when someone tells you exactly how little you mean to them, sometimes the strongest response is to believe them and leave. The first sign that something was wrong came when Meredith realized Julian had stopped reacting. Not arguing. Not questioning. Not even reminding her of dates she'd already decided to ignore. At first, she welcomed it. Silence felt like victory. She returned from another extended weekend away, laughter still clinging to her voice, the faint smell of a different cologne mixed with winter air. Julian was at the dining table, laptop open, sleeves rolled up, expression calm. "You didn't text," she said lightly, setting her bag down. "I was busy," Julian replied without looking up. That was new. Normally, he'd ask how the kids were, how Logan was. He'd nod politely through stories that excluded him. Tonight, there was none of that. Just quiet focus. Meredith frowned. Everything okay at work? Better than ever. She brushed it off. There were more important things on her mind, like the upcoming holidays. Like how seamlessly things were falling back into place with Logan. Like how easy it felt to slip into a rhythm that never demanded explanations. Logan had always understood her. "You don't have to pretend with me," he told her over coffee earlier that week. "We already know how this works." That sentence made her feel powerful, desired, in control. What Meredith didn't notice was how that same week, Julian's world was shifting in the opposite direction. His days grew longer, but not heavier. Meetings felt purposeful again. Conversations sharpened. People listened when he spoke. The overseas position wasn't just an offer anymore. It was a strategy session, a timeline, a blueprint for departure. Zurich wasn't just a city. It was an exit. Julian moved with precision. He transferred responsibilities, quietly updated documents, opened accounts Meredith had never touched. He didn't do it out of spite. He did it out of clarity. For the first time in years, his decisions didn't require approval. One evening, Meredith mentioned casually, "Logan asked if I could stay through New Year's this time." Julian paused mid-sip. "Did he?" She nodded. "The kids want us all together." Julian set the glass down. "Then you should do what feels right." She studied him, unsettled by his lack of resistance. "You're okay with that?" "I said what I meant." Meredith felt a flicker of irritation. She hadn't wanted agreement. She wanted reassurance. Conflict confirmed importance. Silence made her uneasy. That night, while Meredith slept, Julian stood by the window, city lights blinking below. His phone buzzed softly. Flight confirmed. Departure, Monday. 3 days away. He exhaled slowly. The unraveling began sooner than Meredith expected. Logan called her the next afternoon, voice tense. "Hey, did Julian say something to you?" Meredith frowned. "About what?" "He declined the holiday dinner invite. Said he won't be in the country." The words hit her harder than she anticipated. "Not in the country," she repeated. "That's what he said." She laughed awkwardly. That doesn't make sense. But it did. Every small detail she'd ignored suddenly lined up. The empty closet space, the closed laptop, the way Julian no longer looked at her like he was waiting for something. That evening, she confronted him. "You're traveling?" she asked sharply. Julian zipped his carry-on calmly. "Yes." "For work?" "Yes." "When?" "Monday." She stared. "You were going to leave without telling me." "I didn't think it would affect your plans," he replied evenly. Her chest tightened. "How long?" "A while." "How long is a while?" Her voice cracked. Julian finally looked at her. "Long enough to build something that's actually mine." The room felt suddenly unfamiliar. Meredith tried to recover control. "You can't just disappear. We're married." "Are we?" he asked quietly. The question cut deeper than anger ever could. "You're overreacting," she snapped. "You know what this is. Work stress. Ego." Julian smiled faintly. "If that helps you sleep." She watched him close the bag, the finality of the motion making her pulse race. "What about us?" she demanded. Julian paused at the doorway. "You already chose what us looks like." That night, Meredith didn't sleep. By morning, panic crept in. She imagined holidays without Julian's stability. Bills he'd always managed. The quiet security she'd assumed would never leave. She realized how much of her life had leaned on his consistency, even while she'd minimized his role. Logan noticed a shift immediately. "You okay?" he asked. Meredith hesitated. "Julian's going away." Logan shrugged. "You'll be fine. You always are." But his indifference felt colder than Julian's silence. By Sunday evening, Meredith was unraveling. She called Julian's phone. No answer. Texted. No response. For the first time, she felt the power slipping. Not dramatically, but decisively. Julian wasn't chasing. He wasn't threatening. He was leaving. And she was only just realizing how replaceable she had allowed herself to become. The silence hit Meredith hardest after the plane landed. She expected a message, something brief, practical, reassuring. Julian had always been responsible like that. Even during arguments, he never disappeared. He explained. He clarified. He reassured. This time, there was nothing. No update. No call. No familiar rhythm to lean on. 3 days passed before she finally admitted to herself that he wasn't coming back soon. The house felt different without him. Not emptier, exposed. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was revealing. She noticed how many things she'd never handled alone. The bills Julian paid without comment. The appointments he scheduled. The calm presence that anchored her chaos. She tried to focus on the holidays with the kids, telling herself this was what she wanted. She spent evenings at Logan's place, sitting at the table she once shared, laughing a little too loudly, filling the air with forced comfort. But something had changed there too. Logan was distracted, less attentive. He scrolled through his phone while she talked. When she mentioned Julian again, his jaw tightened. "You're thinking about him a lot," Logan said one night. Meredith bristled. "We're married." "Then why are you here?" he asked flatly. The question stunned her. She realized then that Logan had never intended to rebuild a life with her. He enjoyed the convenience, the nostalgia, the reassurance that she was still available when it suited him. Julian had offered commitment. Logan offered familiarity, and familiarity was suddenly insufficient. In Zurich, Julian's life sharpened into focus. The city moved with precision, clean lines, clear expectations, no emotional clutter. He stepped into his role without hesitation. Meetings stretched late. Decisions carried weight. People respected him not because of obligation, but because of competence. For the first time in years, he wasn't explaining himself. At night, he ran along the river, breath steady, thoughts clear. He replayed moments not with regret, but understanding. He saw how slowly he'd been trained to minimize himself. How often he'd accepted second place because he believed love required sacrifice. Now he understood something deeper. Sacrifice without reciprocity is erosion. One evening, his assistant mentioned a package that had arrived from the States. Inside was a neatly folded scarf. Meredith's handwriting on the note careful and deliberate. "We need to talk. Please." Julian folded the note and placed it back in the box. He didn't respond. Meredith unraveled quietly. Her texts grew longer, more emotional. Apologies crept in, not fully formed, but enough to signal fear. "I didn't mean things the way they sounded. You know, I appreciate you. This distance is getting to me." She called his office twice. The calls were politely redirected. Logan noticed her distraction and finally confronted it. "You're not present anymore," he said. "If you're waiting for him to come back, you're wasting your time." Meredith's voice shook. "You don't understand." Logan laughed humorlessly. "No, you don't. You think you can keep both worlds. That's not how this works." She drove home that night in silence, the weight of realization settling in. Julian had never been the backup. He had been the foundation, and she treated him like an accessory. 2 weeks later, reality arrived with paperwork. A formal notice. Calm. Precise. Julian wasn't dramatic. He didn't accuse or insult. He laid out facts, timelines, boundaries. Meredith read the document twice before her hands began to tremble. He wasn't asking her to change. He was changing the structure of his life to exclude uncertainty. She called him immediately. This time he answered. "Julian," she said, breathless. "Please, we need to fix this." "I'm listening," he replied evenly. "I made mistakes," she admitted. "I didn't see what I was doing." "That's true," he said calmly. "I want you back," she said, voice breaking. "We can reset. I'll make changes." Julian was silent for a moment. "Meredith," he said gently, "you didn't lose me because you loved your children. You lost me because you stopped respecting your marriage." Tears spilled freely now. "I'll prove it." "You already did," he replied, "just not in the way you hoped." She whispered, "Is there any chance?" Julian exhaled slowly. "I'm not angry. I'm just finished competing for a place that should have been secure." The line went quiet. Meredith sat alone long after the call ended. The holidays arrived without ceremony. No shared traditions. No quiet strength beside her. Just the echo of choices she could no longer undo. And thousands of miles away, Julian stood on a balcony overlooking a city that asked nothing of him but excellence. For the first time, he felt whole. Not because he won, but because he finally walked away with his dignity intact. The final shift didn't happen in a dramatic moment. It came quietly, through distance, routine, and consequences settling into place. By the time winter fully wrapped the city in Zurich, Julian had stopped checking the time difference. His life no longer revolved around what he was leaving behind. Mornings began with purpose. Evenings ended with a calm he hadn't known he was missing. He was no longer reacting. He was choosing. Back home, Meredith felt the absence everywhere. The holidays passed in fragments. Laughter that sounded hollow. Traditions that no longer fit. The children noticed the change, asking questions she struggled to answer without revealing the truth. That stability isn't something you can neglect and expect to remain. Logan faded from her life almost entirely. Once the comfort was gone, so was his interest. He had never planned to rebuild. He had simply enjoyed being prioritized without responsibility. When Meredith finally stopped reaching out, there was no fight, just silence. That silence was different from Julian's. Julian's silence had direction. Logan's had nothing behind it. One evening, Meredith sat alone at the dining table, staring at her phone. She typed and erased the same message half a dozen times before finally sending it. I understand now. I didn't value what I had. If there's any chance to talk in person, I'll come to you. The reply came hours later. You don't need to travel. We could talk like this. It wasn't cold. It was final. Meredith pressed her hand to her chest, realizing something she had avoided for months. Julian wasn't punishing her. He was protecting himself. Their last conversation was calm, almost painfully so. I don't hate you, Julian told her, but I won't rebuild something where I had to compete for basic respect. I never meant to make you feel replaceable, she said quietly. But you did, he replied. An intention doesn't undo impact. She swallowed hard. You were always there. I thought you'd always be there. Julian's voice softened. That's the problem. You confused reliability with obligation. They sat in silence, the weight of truth resting between them. I hope you find what you're looking for, Meredith said at last. I already have, Julian replied. Months later, Julian stood in a conference hall overlooking the Alps, listening as his name was announced for a leadership recognition. Applause filled the room, not loud, not overwhelming, but earned. He thought back to the man he used to be, the one who stayed quiet to keep peace, the one who believed love meant shrinking himself. That man was gone. In his place stood someone steadier, clearer, someone who understood that being chosen once is not the same as being chosen every day. Across the ocean, Meredith rebuilt her life slowly. Therapy, boundaries, hard lessons learned too late. She became more present, not just for her children, but for herself. Growth didn't come as redemption. It came as accountability, and that was enough. Julian returned home one spring morning, not to reclaim what he'd lost, but to collect what he'd left behind, his remaining belongings, a few memories, and closure. He stood in the empty house for a moment, breathing in the quiet. No resentment, no regret, just clarity. As he locked the door for the last time, Julian understood the real revenge had never been distance or success. It was self-respect. And once you reclaim that, no one ever gets to demote you again.